Hello, everybody. Welcome to UFI Connect number 60. I'm Christian Druard, Secretary of the Sustainable Development Working Group, and very happy to introduce this webinar on sustainability in the exhibition industry. This webinar will focus on the environmental aspects of sustainability. UFI has committed to drive this important topic of sustainability since a long time, and I believe this session illustrates several levels of actions we undertake. I will post in the chat several important links as we go along the session, and I invite you to post any questions in that chat. We already have some organized, so we may not have time to answer them all, and we'll get back to you after the meeting if we haven't answered some. Before I present the agenda, let me share some results of recent UFI research to highlight, if necessary, the importance of the topic for our customers. 73% of exhibitors and visitors agree or strongly agree that it's important for a trade show to display a strong commitment to sustainability. 34% of exhibitors and 36% of visitors say they would not attend a trade show that does not have a responsible approach to sustainability. I believe that sets the context, and let me now introduce our program for today. Our first panel will present and discuss the results of a research set out to evaluate the most material impacts on the environment from the operations of the B2B trade show industry in the US and Canada. That work was initiated following a meeting organized ahead of co-located UFI and CISO events in Orlando, Florida, back in 2018, and it was funded by 14 partners, including UFI. CISO was the main contributor, and I will later share the link of the session they dedicate to this research as well next week. Our second panel will provide an example from Europe, coming from Milan, Italy, with a case study that was finalist of our UFI Sustainable Development Award this year. Last, we will conclude to indicate how all these initiatives are now feeding the ongoing Net Zero Carbon Event Initiative that unites the whole event industry to accelerate the transition towards global net zero emissions. UFI has run the project office of this initiative for the first two phases, and this is now handed over to JMIC that we are happy to have with us today for the third part of the agenda. So welcome to all our speakers, and let me now pass over to Danica.
Good morning, everybody, from at least from the US. It's morning. So welcome to our webinar today. We're going to be talking about how we can move towards a more sustainable future in the trade show industry. And we have a great panel of experts here for you today. Here is a list of our speakers today. As you can see, we have a great lineup of expert panelists from some of the leading organizations in the trade show industry. And we're going to kick this off. Ben is going to give us some highlights of the North American research that was just recently released. So Ben, I'll let you take it away with some slides and introduce.
Thanks, Danica, and thanks, Christian. It's actually really good to see so many familiar names on the participant list, so thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just really going to give us a bit of framing before we go into the panel session, and it's my task to summarize work by hundreds of people over the last 3 years to try and understand the environmental impact that comes from all of the positive benefits of our industry. So this will be a real whistle-stop tour of a couple of the headlines of what the report has found. And then I know Christian will be sharing links to both the report itself, but also the detailed webinar next week, where we'll really get into the findings and some of the recommendations from the report. So you forgive me, I feel very strange, all of you looking at me. So I'm actually going to share my screen so I can hide behind some slides for a bit. And my hope is everybody can see the screen I just put up. I'm sure one of my panel members will shout if not. So I wanted to talk to you about the Finding the Future Together report that was released over the summer. And as I said, the detailed webinar is next week. The reason this report was created, it really came out of the meeting that Christian talked about when UFI held a gathering of senior leaders in Florida. And a group of about 30 people who had a strong interest in sustainability at events from all around the world came together. And we started to recognize that our industry has some incredible strengths, and we should never forget this when we're telling the story about the environmental impacts. Those impacts are not in isolation. They come as a result of creating hundreds of thousands of jobs all around the world and hundreds of billions of dollars of economic value. If we then think about what our customers get from this, we stimulate nearly $1 trillion in business sales and create 6 million jobs down in the supply chain. In the US, that leads to 100 billion in taxes being paid. So incredible value for the societies that host events, and incredible value for the people who come to those events. So again, this study focused on the US, and we looked at work done by SEIA and others. And they've identified that 45 million people in the US and Canada alone have enhanced connections and improved relationships because of the ability to meet in person at our events. But that also facilitates innovation, new discoveries. It promotes diversity of thought and creates interaction, making every industry that we serve more effective. And so everything that we come across on the environmental impact has to be balanced against these positive impacts as well. The group who came together realized that there is awareness growing of the environmental impacts from the economic impacts that we're benefiting from. And sustainability, as you all know, is about creating a balance between the economic impacts, the environmental impacts, and the social impacts. So Christian shared these statistics from the excellent work by UFI and CISO and Explori in their Global Visitor Insight study. We know that the general population, and particularly the population of people who come to events and trade shows, cares about sustainability. They might not be selecting an event because it's sustainable, because they need to go to that event anyway, but they will certainly think less of an event, and net promoter scores will be limited if they don't get sustainability right at the event. And more importantly, perhaps, the people who pay for all of our salaries and pay for the costs of running the events, the exhibitors, a third of them now are saying they're increasingly cautious about associating their brand with an event that is not considering climate change and waste and diversity, inclusion and health and safety and other things. So it's really, really important that we take this agenda seriously. And perhaps more excitingly, our audiences, the people who come to our events, they're looking for content that helps them solve the sustainability challenges of their own sector. So we can be multipliers to not just solve the sustainability challenges in our industry, but in all of the industries we serve. And from Informer's perspective, that's actually turning into a commercial opportunity as well, that we have people who want to come to events specifically for sustainability reasons. We all know that because the general public cares, our employees care. And I don't know about all of you, but we're finding it challenging to attract talent in the current environment because there are so many choices and so many employers fighting for great talent. And one of the ways in which we're differentiating ourselves and drawing some of the best people in is because we have made a firm commitment on sustainability, and people want to work for a business that matches their values. And I think finally, really just what we recognize as a group was there's a lot of organizations, including many of you in this call, who are doing a really good job on sustainability. But there's an opportunity to tell our story better, both individually as venues and supply chain partners and organizers, but also collectively as an industry. So the work that UFI is doing, the work that AEO is doing, the work that CISO is doing, where we come together and narrate the benefits from our industry is a fantastic story. And I think the Net Zero Carbon events is a great example of that. What excited me about this work, and I drew the short straw and got to talk to you about it today, is that 14 organizations, as Christian said, came together and crowdfunded this. So a huge thank you to CISO for being the majority funder on this. But we couldn't have done it without the support of UFI, the EIC, MGM, Freeman, GES, Emerald, IMEX, RX. So many organizations really put time and effort into this to make it a genuine collaboration across the industry. And again, looking at things like the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative that's taken this to a whole other level. It's really exciting what the pandemic has helped our industry do in coming together and working as a group. Now, this report set out to do a few things, but specifically focusing on the US and Canada market as a very homogeneous market that we can understand more easily than the whole global market. That would be a bit of a big bite to take all at once. We wanted to understand the main environmental issues from our industry so that we can tackle the important stuff, not perhaps some of the distractions that we're seeing, such as plastic bags. And then we wanted to come together as an industry and think about where are our strengths, what's the great stuff we're already doing, because we want to tell that story better, and where can we improve collectively together. And that's set against the background of stakeholder views, where many of the organizations we talk to, including ratings agencies and governments and supply chain partners and members of the industry, they are very much saying, we're increasingly concerned about the environmental impacts, but we recognize the value of events, as I talked about. And all of us really saw it an opportunity to do better if we can figure out a way of doing it efficiently, collectively, and ideally with a net financially positive as well as a net environmentally positive outcome. What the study found is really where the 6 most material impacts from our industry are likely to be. And this graph tries to show the relative scale. So if I just take a second to try and explain it, across from going from left to right, that's how well we think trade shows can influence the sustainability of those choices. And the vertical axis, so going from top to bottom, is the relative scale of the impact. So up in the top left, I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody, but the CO2 emissions, so the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the travel of people to our events, is by far and away the largest impact of our industry and the most difficult thing for us as an industry to control, because it's largely in the control of the airlines and the travelers. Without that travel, we wouldn't get all of the benefits. And a lot of work is going on to understand how that the coming together of people can actually save travel overall. Logistics, you can see there's quite a significant error bar. So as the bar fades off, that is the level of uncertainty in this. Logistics is also a very significant piece of the environmental impact of events, and it is challenging to control, particularly the shipping from the exhibitors to the general service contractors. And to round out the third area around the CO2 impacts on the right-hand side there, venue energy is perhaps one of the most controllable things, because the venues are in control of whether they buy renewable energy or not, by and large. And we can all work together to improve the efficiency of energy use. That's seen as quite a significant area as well. It's akin to the logistics impacts, certainly for the last mile logistics in the US. What was very, very interesting, I think, though, is the brown areas there where the study deep dived into the source of waste, because a lot of our attention goes on to plastics, which you can see are the smallest amount of waste at an exhibition. And a lot of attention goes on to carpet as well, which is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. Actually focusing on food, which has a very high carbon footprint for every ton of food that's wasted, and trying to get better sorting at the venues was definitely a focus that was found. And then over in the US as well, working on warehouse waste and the way in which booths are constructed was key. What I'd love to talk about with my panel members is the 6th area of impact, which is booth construction, because that varies very significantly between the US and the rest of the world. And I'll be intrigued to see if this study is expanded, how much higher booth construction is in a world where build and burn booths are more common, such as in Europe and Asia. To sort of wrap this up, the largest impacts, if we cover the 6, it's the travel by participants, it's the venue energy use, and the general service contractor logistics. It's the waste from the venues and the waste from the warehouses of the general service contractors, and then the materials used in booth construction. All of these have solutions. All of them are things we're already working on as an industry, and all of them are areas that we can work together better. And the report talks a lot about the detail of this, what's already been done and what more can be done. So if Christian hasn't already, certainly the links for the full report, it's available online right now. And if you're interested in a much more detailed conversation around this and some fantastic speakers, of course, not as good as the speakers today, you can register for the CISO webinar that covers this next week. And again, just from me, a huge thanks to all 14 of the organizations who put in time and money, because this report is the first of its kind, and I think it will hopefully lead us all forward and very successfully to make a big deal of this. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hand over to Danica, and we can get into the panel session. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben, for that great overview. There's a lot of good information that's in this new report, and please do join the CISO webinar next week for a deeper dive into all of the specifics of that data. So we're going to spend the next 20 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit with each of our, with Ben, Helen, and Jason, a little bit about where they're at with their company in terms of their sustainability journey. So let's get started there. How about Jason? You want to tell us a little bit about, where Freeman is at in its sustainability journey?
Yeah, sure. I think from a Freeman perspective, to echo Ben's comments, it's been fantastic playing an important part in the production of this report, and certainly going forward with the stakeholders that we've already identified and hopefully widening the group, we want to continue to contribute. From our perspective, as Ben's previously outlined, there are some areas where, as a general service contractor, particularly in the North American market, Freeman has an important part to play with some of its peers, who have also contributed to the report. But certainly when we've been concerned about sustainability and have taken it on as a kind of innovation challenge rather than an existential challenge for our business, because naturally with the clients and stakeholders that we've worked with for the 90 plus years that we've been around as a business, there's always been a semblance of innovation by necessity that has gone on within our business and amongst some of our competitors. But sustainability has sort of given us an extra boost in terms of how we innovate, particularly in the areas of how we manage some of our quite significant logistics infrastructure. And then also, as sort of previously just touched on, within the booth construction space, and then how we work in partnership with both show organizers, but also with venues to kind of optimize the opportunities to reduce our impact, but then also look to innovate and recycle and reuse. So we've been on the, and it's an often overused phrase, journey for a while now. But we as an organization, we're absolutely delighted that there are so many other stakeholders engaged in the cause. And it feels like with this report, there's a little bit of a line in the sand that says, here's some great pieces of actionable information that we can all move forward with as an industry. So, we're delighted to be part of it. And maybe later in the questions, I can tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in the general service contractor area.
Yeah. It's great to hear your perspective there. Ben, what about you in terms of from the show organizer perspective at Informa? Where are you at on your sustainability journey?
It's a long journey, so I feel like we've got a way to go, but I think we're making progress. I actually love what Jason said, this idea of it being an innovation challenge rather than an existential challenge. We kind of vary. Our CEO and Charlie McCurdy and others who many of you will have seen around, they all see that if we don't tackle the sustainability agenda, there's a risk that our industry will become a pariah, will become the tobacco companies. People won't want to come to our events. If it doesn't take many Instagram pictures of the waste coming out of the back of a venue to start causing us a problem. But actually, we've been able to flip the narrative around. And because so many of our audience want this, we find that we can deliver on those desires. We can have diversity and inclusion networking events. We can have sustainability content. 80% of our events now around the world are powered by renewable electricity. All of these things are helping present our product as a high quality product, which allows us to have a better pricing discussion, but it also helps resonate with people's values, which moves us from being a seller of square footage to a partner in an industry that's trying to solve its challenges. And I'm finding that's really inspiring our show teams, and the new talent who comes in loves this, and they give extra time and extra effort to figure out ways of our show making a difference in their communities and then in the industry as well. So I think, exactly as Jason, you said, flipping it from being a cost and a negative and a compliance thing, the ESG agenda is full of this kind of thing where you just got to do the numbers, to something that excites and inspires our stakeholders has been a real step forward for us.
Great. And do we have Helen on here to give the RX perspective?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
There you are.
So yeah, I think I would agree with Ben and Jason that what's really exciting about where we are in sustainability at the moment is that we are recognizing it's an industry challenge and an industry-wide challenge, and that, you know, we alone at RX can't tackle this ourselves, and so we have to collaborate as an industry. So that's why this report on North America is so significant, because it's really bringing those different stakeholders together to try and identify solutions. But you know, at RX, one of the first things that we started to do was convene a global sustainability council. So we've really tried to identify leaders across our business, and I know one or two of them are actually on the webinar today, to be able to share what's happening, because we have really great examples that are happening at show level that don't get elevated even within our business. So we need to be able to learn from each other within our business. We've also started to try and measure our carbon footprint. We've looked at, you know, we want to get better at measurement. So we're collecting data, we're prioritizing data collection from our venues where we hold our shows. We have data probably from about 20% of our venues, so we know that it's not easy for us to collect that data, and we know it's not easy for the venues to report that data. So we want to try and understand how we can support those venues in reporting. And yeah, we're trying to go deeper on the data, looking at those other elements, the elements that Ben shared in the report, those logistics, those waste elements, like how do we report that? How do we better understand our footprint? Because it's only by understanding that footprint that we can really identify the areas where we can make those reductions.
Great. I also want to talk a little bit about, you know, is this something that you're seeing interest in from your customers in terms of sustainability? And, you know, what are they asking for? You know, what's the pulse there on the customer side? So Helen, you can start and then we'll go backwards.
Okay, well, I think Ben did a really good job highlighting, you know, where the industry's at in his slides. But yeah, we are hearing this from customers. You know, earlier this year we did a survey with some of our visitors actually, and you know, over 2/3 of them were saying that sustainability plays an important role in deciding whether they attend our shows or not. So that kind of echoes, I think, the statistics that were shared earlier today. We also have sectors that are exhibiting with us where sustainability has long been an issue for that industry, for that sector. And so in order, you know, in order for them to address the sector, the sustainability within the sector, they want to make sure that we as an organization are also addressing sustainability. So absolutely, like, this is a really important issue that we're hearing from, you know, from customers, from many different stakeholders, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it depends on the market. Some markets are further ahead than other markets.
Yeah, I think probably the demand and the pressure is increased in different regions in the world, as well as different industry sectors. So, you know, we have shows that are in pretty carbon intensive industries, for example, construction or manufacturing. And, you know, that's long been sustainability and decarbonizing those industries have been a challenge that they've been addressing as an industry for a long time. And we just need to be mindful of how we can support that industry in transitioning, as well as reflecting that, you know, we ourselves are trying to transition.
Great. And Ben, what are you hearing from your customers and interest in terms of this area?
I think you both summed it up really well. You know, there's different levels of this, but the phrase that I keep thinking of at the moment is cognitive bias. You know, Helen and myself, you know, day to day, hour to hour, we're thinking about sustainability. So we see sustainability everywhere. Some of our senior leaders absolutely see the same thing. Others, perhaps because it's not on their radar, they don't see it, but I think it's there. So 6 years ago when I joined Informa, yeah, our green construction show, our wind power show, even our leather fair in Hong Kong or our natural food show, they were talking about sustainability. Now, if I go to our concrete show, or even our pool and spa and tile show, or our China Beauty Expo show, sustainability is there if you just start looking for it. And once you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. We were at a big show in Singapore a few weeks ago, absolutely blown away, 2,000 exhibitors in the food industry. And I think a third of the stalls were promoting their food based on sustainability credentials. There was a whole new section on alternative proteins. And this is Asia, a region that's typically said that's not interested in sustainability. I know we have many people from Asia on the call. So I think actually when you start looking for it, it's really there now, and it's only going to become stronger. And I've got to be honest, I think anyone in our industry who doesn't start talking seriously about this is going to get left behind or have a horrible time catching up. So, I think it's great that so many people join calls like this to learn what can be done.
And Jason, from your perspective, since you have such a broad range of clients, customer, trade shows and exhibitors, so what are you hearing from your clients?
Yeah, I think certainly would echo Ben and Helen's comments there, but particularly in terms of that broad client base, we're also working directly with some corporates. And we're working sometimes out with the trade show space that we're talking about here, but we're still hearing the same types of questions, and with those questions the same types of wants and needs from our customers. And importantly for us, with the kind of global footprint that we have, we need to make sure that we're backing up some of our claims and also some of our actions with genuinely impactful and authentic moves in the right direction from a sustainability perspective. So it's great that we're having lots of conversations, but really at the core, in terms of where we sit within the supply chain at different levels, it's important that we can back that up with actions that are genuinely making an impact. And I think, again, that's why studies like this, and we can work collaboratively, then we can see where we need to use collective influence and where we can have individual impact. And certainly for us, it's making sure that our actions result in really positive progress there. And those are the kind of things that move those discussions forward with our customers.
Great. You bring up a good point. So you're talking about the data. Any surprises from the data from each of your perspectives? Jason, we'll start with you since you're on here. What stood out to you from the data from your perspective?
No major surprises in terms of anecdotally where we thought we would net out, but I think it's so important to create a sense of a baseline with as many substantive and substantiated sources. And that's why you move past the anecdotal, and although the qualitative data is an important part of this survey too, to actually have some quantitative data points that we can work move forward as a baseline, and then also tie into some of the initiatives that Ben mentioned, such as the Net Zero Events Pledge and initiative. It's crucial. We've got to be not only using this data, but we've got to be taking a science-based approach, as well as the importance of communication to how we tackle this within our industry. So the data just almost reinforced and maybe highlighted some things which were slightly more skewed than others. So yes, I thought there would be some significant impacts in terms of the carbon areas and how that was split between those attendees that were traveling to, and then some of the impact that maybe some of my business and my peers would have had, particularly in the logistics area. But it was great just to actually quantify that, because then we can actually move forward and see how we can use that as the benchmark and beat it and get better.
Ben, what about you? I know you saw a couple of surprises and things that stood out.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. It like Jason said, it reinforced and gives us evidence for the first time that we're focusing in the right areas. But the relative size, I think, of the logistics, particularly the upstream logistics, and in America, a lot of the a lot of the equipment used on the event is shipped to the general service contractor before it goes to the venue. And that doesn't happen as much in Europe and Asia, from what I understand. And even then, the hints at how big that upstream logistics footprint was really suggests that we need to figure out how we run trade shows, moving far less to the trade show. And then even in the US, where disposable stands are extremely rare, it's a few % of the overall booth construction, the waste from those booths was still significant. And we know that an average 10 by 10 booth creates more weight of waste than an entire UK household does in a year. And I think this is what I mean about our hidden impacts. If people start to realize that, and right now most exhibitors have no idea what happens to their booth at the end of its life, we could have a challenge. And therefore it's a chance for the industry to really get ahead of itself and start thinking about how do we change our exhibition system so that we're using a lot more reusable systems. You know, not necessarily frame and fabric or pipe and drape or shell scheme, but bringing on board a whole new variety of booth construction systems. I see Edwin's here from B Matrix, for example. The power of a really interesting reusable booth system that can be customized to shape is fascinating. There's a lot of innovative companies coming in on this. So I think there's a surprise in how big an issue that is. And I think it's only increased in form of urgency to crack on with this through things like the Better Stands program that we've got.
Yeah. I want to jump on. We have like three more minutes for this section. So I want to, there's a couple questions in the chat, but before we do that, I want to quickly ask, I want to talk about cost, investments, and opportunities around sustainability, because that's what, you know, everybody is curious about. How much is it going to cost? How much are people investing? And where are their opportunities? So let's talk a little bit about that. Helen, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. Sure. So yeah, there has to be investment in sustainability, and I think there has to be also the freedom to test things which may or may not work. So we have to give like our show teams the freedom to do that and explore, because I mean, as Jason mentioned right at the beginning, we have to innovate, and Ben's also kind of touched this, just thinking about booth systems. We have to innovate, and there has to be an investment in that innovation, and we need to find ways to support our show teams to make these kind of brave and bold decisions when it comes to sustainability. You know, things that in the short term might be challenging, such as eliminating carpet, or, you know, not printing show catalogues, decisions even that might have a small impact on the overall footprint of an event, but actually will, you know, they're very visible and they might initially be painful. So I think that there, you know, there has to be this support, and we're very lucky at RX that we have this leadership support for that. But yeah, I'm very mindful of time, so there's a lot I could say about this, but maybe I'll pause there.
Jason, what about you? Talk about some of the cost, investments, and opportunities.
I think a lot of it at this stage now, even though we still have a long way to go in terms of that innovation piece that we've all touched upon, is there are now viable trade-offs that some of our customers and some attendees can actually make. And as long as those are communicated in a clear way, and in a sense that if we use X versus using Y, then the positive sustainability output will be A versus B, then actually most people in the entire events industry, but then also importantly our attendees, are actually much more open-minded to dealing with some of those trade-offs. So that could be, as Helen mentioned, in the often discussed and important issue around carpet, because we do know that even sometimes when you take carpet away, maybe your NPS score goes down because people have sore feet tromping around a very large scale trade show. But these kind of things over time can be communicated throughout the entire industry, but then importantly to attendees, and they start to become comfortable with those trade-offs because the benefits are better and more rounded in the long term. So, you know, I think the cost question is starting to, I suppose, denigrate and minimize over time. But it's as long as companies like Freeman and some of our peers continue to be focused on innovation rather than just a race to the bottom in terms of lowest cost that we can offer, because then we do get into some of the challenges around using products and materials that just aren't sustainable and aren't helping us move forward.
You've also realized some efficiencies, though, that are saving some costs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
not using something and being smarter about how you move things around, it has a positive financial benefit. It's true of any good logistics company, and we operate as a logistics company in some instances. And actually not producing the carpet is a saving, because you're not going to the factory for it and not paying for it.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, Ben. I know he had some great comments on this area, so I want to get those in real quick before we move over to our next phase.
Yeah, really quick. I'm really bullish on this. First step of sustainability is waste less. Waste less time, waste less energy, waste less fuel. So it's going to save you money. You can take that money and reinvest it into the really quick, easy wins in sustainability. When Informa moved to 96% renewable electricity, it cost us 0.5% on our energy bills. These days, it's about 1.5%. But there's no excuse for not moving to renewable power now. No excuse. It's so easy to get. It's so cheap. Yeah, if every venue and every GSC and every organizer moved over to that tomorrow, we would see an enormous drop in footprint in our industry, and our customers love it. Every one of our events has got renewable energy logos on them now where we can. And then ultimately, I think sustainability is going to be an area we should all make money, because our products will be higher quality. Our customers will want more of this. And whether that's suppliers to us coming and saying, we've got a better solution to you, this is why it's better, or going to our customers and protecting our revenue, but then also finding new opportunities to grow the audience because they want to learn about this. So there's no reason not to get on with this. But Helen's right, it takes an investment up front to start that snowball rolling.
Yeah. And you've been able to grow audiences because of sustainability, and then also get some sponsorships, right, in order to maybe offset some of the costs. Yeah,
I think if you made us a profit center on sustainability across the business, we'd be in the green. We'd be making money. Great.
Thank you all. I think some of the questions were addressed right now, and then we're going to be addressing some of them later on. So I want to move forward to Vincenzo and have him talk a little bit about what they're doing at Fiera Milano. It's, they have a ESG strategy, and they're integrating it into their business model. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the steps they're taking and how they developed that business model. So I'll let him take it away here.
Thank you. And good evening, everybody, and good morning from the other coming from far. So the ESG strategy of Fiera Milano is based on 5 steps. The first one was the definition of a corporate purpose. So our reason for being, which is to create multiple business opportunities through our European hub and global network. And then the next steps were the definition of a mission, how we are going to reach this purpose, which is by providing innovative, sustainable, and high-standing events. The second steps of our strategy was the definition, the setting up of a structured governance in terms of sustainability, starting from the board of directors. So we have an internal body within the board of directors that is completely dedicated to risk management and sustainability. Then we have a core sustainability team, which I'm responsible for, and a network of 20 ambassadors with specific responsibilities and competencies on all the ESG areas. So waste manager, energy manager, they're responsible for food and beverage and stand fittings and so on. The other and fundamental step was the integration of sustainability in our financial long-term strategy, so the strategic plan to 2025. We believe that this is the only way that sustainability can become an enabler for the achievement of long-term strategic goals. So we have defined a sustainability plan with 25 actions, and we believe the most important is the measurement of the carbon footprint of at least 20 exhibitions owned by Fiera Milano. The other step was to joining industry-leading initiatives like the Net Carbon Zero event. So we believe we are now ready to give some contribution. And of course, the last step is to join a sustainable working group like this one at UFI. We believe it's really important to learn from the other players and to share our experience.
Yeah, and I want to take a deeper dive into a specific case study about a recent show, the Homey Fashion and Jewel Show. And you were able to, tell us a little bit about that show and why you selected it for the carbon neutrality.
Thank you for the question. So Homey Fashion and Jewels was the first step of our journey in measuring the carbon footprint of our events. Fashion and Jewels is an international show completely dedicated to jewelry, bijou, and accessories. Just to give you an idea of the size, it's 15,000 visitors, 350 exhibitors, around 10,000 square meters. We decided to start by concentrating on this industry because we understood that the jewelry industry is increasingly sensitive to carbon neutral. In fact, major players like Kering, Cartier, Tiffany are working together in order to define collective environmental target of carbon neutrality. So we decide as Fiera Milano because we are aware that we can influence exhibitors, visitors, and suppliers, but we can also be a container of innovative initiatives and sustainable initiatives. So we wanted to do our part by promoting a carbon neutral event within this reference industry of jewelry sector.
So tell us a little bit about your assessment process for those who might be wanting to do the same thing and start the same journey. How did you determine what to assess, and then, who did you work with to evaluate that?
So firstly, we engaged a specialized advisor, Rete Clima, with whom we developed a proprietary model for the assessment of the carbon footprint of the exhibition held in the Fiera Milano premises. Then we started by identifying different phases of the exhibition. So setup, organization, execution, and dismantling, and the related source of emissions associated to the single phases. For example, visitors, exhibitors, employees' mobility, energy venues, the sources coming from stand fitting structures or advertising material. Then we launched data collection process, so involving all the colleagues with specific competencies on this area. We use the LCA methodology, life cycle assessment, integrated with different ISO certification related to environmental measurement. Then we came up to the conclusion of the total GHG emissions generated by Homey Fashion and Jewels, and we entirely neutralized the emissions by investing in a certified environmental project in India, thanks to which Fiera Milano was able to support the development of a photovoltaic panel. So we also contribute to the technological transfer in this area to the production of green energy, and of course we compensated all the emissions generated by the events. So we believe this was a very interesting experience of collaboration with all the employees. So it's also a nice experience of positive contamination within the company with the target of reaching environmental goals.
So, I think it's important. Helen talked about it. Everyone's talked about the idea of measurement, and then, putting together those baselines and how important that is. So working with the company to be able to do that. And tell us a little bit about some of your results from that.
Yes, it was very interesting to note that the output of this project was not so different from the one that was presented before by my USA and Canadian colleagues. So this means that the path is going in the right way. So these occasions are really important to share our practice. So the main outcomes are that 70% of the emissions came from visitor mobility. So the first largest environmental impact coming from visitors transportation. Second place with 20%, exhibitors mobility. Third largest environmental impact coming from stand fittings and structures. With reference to this specific source of emission, we calculated and identified the type of stand fittings, the material used, the weight and kilometers, because we also measured the distance and the transportation from the warehouse until the venue. Then we have food and beverage source of emission and wastes, 2% and 1% respectively, and minor impacts coming from advertising materials, employee mobility, and other source of emission.
Yeah, that sounds like if anybody wants to take a deeper dive into some of those numbers, the link in the chat has some great data on the breakdowns for each phase, and then where, you know, the evaluation and some of the numbers they were able to put together. So tell us a little bit, you know, a deeper dive into the carbon emissions. What are some of the things that you're putting in place, impactful measures going forward for the venue?
Well, as it was already mentioning before, when a company needs to decide which measure need to be taken place, you have to consider the influence that the company has on this specific source of emission. So if we consider of the source emission that we have assessed, we choose the electricity consumption because we really can have an impact. So already in 2021, our shareholder and owner of the venue, Fondazione Fiera Milano, invested around 2.5 million in the installation of a photovoltaic solar panel on the roof of the Fiera Milano premises, 8.5 megawatt of power, thanks to which Fiera Milano was able to purchase 20% of its electricity needs from renewable sources. We are very proud of this collaboration because we believe it's really an interesting example of collaboration along the value chain, in this case between venue manager and venue owner for a collective environmental target. So we are very happy of this collaboration that will be that will continue in the next years, and the power generated by the photovoltaic power can also increase in the next year. So also the renewable source percentage of Fiera Milano will increase accordingly.
Yeah, that's kind of what Ben mentioned earlier, going to renewable energy. I mean, you know, that there are so many options out there, and that's where you're investing in the future, not necessarily just neutralizing the carbons, but also focused on renewable energy.
Yeah, in relation to this, just the last note, we are aware that the neutrality, it's let's say short-term palliative for the environment, but it's already a strong sign that we want to do to the market, to our client, as a commitment of the group. Of course, the most important are the investments, and so we are collaborating with our shareholders, owner of the venue, in order to have a long-term commitment, very concrete.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your example. What are your plans for next year, real quick, in terms of, you know, where you're going to increase the number of shows that work towards this, and just give us a high level of what your plans are for 2023.
Thank you for the question. So according to our sustainability plan for next year, we have 5 exhibitions that are connected to specific industry where the carbon neutrality is still very strong and felt, like the tourism. And so we are working on increasing number of exhibitions. First, for the measurement, that is our priority, because after the measurement, we can compare the previous and the next exhibition and to focus on specific energy efficiency measure. And so we have really a lot of work to do. Environment is not only the priority. We are working also on diversity and inclusion. So we are launching a diversity and inclusion committee with the diversity and inclusion manager, and a strategy that will be along the strategic plan, so to 2025.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I want to jump over now to Alex with net zero carbon events, and he's going to give us an update. There was a press conference last week at IMEX that talked a lot about some of the updates and the processes that they're going to be helping show organizers with to get out there. And then also the number, I was really impressed with the number of organizations that have already signed on to become committed to reducing carbon emissions by 50% by 2030, and then also to net zero by 2050. So Alex, you want to take it away and give us an update on what's going on?
Sure. Thanks, Danica, and hello, everyone. I prepared also a couple of slides because some might not be familiar with the project, so it's better if I show it what we have. Just a second. I hope you will be able to see it. So do you see it? Okay, very well. So indeed, thank you very much again for the introduction, Danica. And the report we talked about is very interesting. The findings of the report are being fed into the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative, and I would like to talk about it today. So what is the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative actually? To put simply, it's the meetings and events industry answer to the climate change. The initiative started with conversations between like-minded people, seeing the need for the collaboration. And as a result, the Net Zero Carbon Event Initiative was created. It was set up last year, and the same year, UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, started their support of the initiative. And this was also the reason why the pledge of the industry was introduced at the COP26 meeting last year in Glasgow. So inclusivity was, is, and will remain key. The project is open to all organizations involved in the events, and they can join the initiative at any time. And whereas the registration of and support is free of charge, financial contribution is, of course, very much welcomed. The project is secured financially. However, with more contributions, we could go even faster. And this is also the aim of the project. So here it's a very important slide. We have, you can see the current financial contributors. We have more than 25 companies and organizations with different backgrounds. And as you can see, we've introduced different levels of financial engagement, from platinum level to as much as you can afford on the green level. And I would like to thank once again to all the supporters who contribute to the realization of the project. So from 26 supporters pretty much a year ago, the initiative grew to over 400 supporting organizations. And there is a very good mix between operators, associations, and other partners such as destinations, media, etc. And we're very proud that this initiative is truly global, since we have supporters from all over the world, and we're hopeful that we will get even more companies in future. Now a communication strategy is underway, and we have created several social media channels, and you're all very welcome to follow the project's progress, for example, on LinkedIn or Twitter or both. And in terms of the phases of the project, we have three differentiated phases. The first phase was actually the release of the pledge, which was done last year at the COP26 in Glasgow. It's basically a commitment by companies involved in meetings and events industry to achieve the net zero carbon by 2050 at the latest, and having an interim target to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 by 50%. And the second phase was the creation of the roadmap, which is to be released at the COP27 event in Egypt on November 11th, which happens to be also the UN Decarbonization Day. The roadmap is a detailed document of over 80 pages describing the overall process, and it's done step by step. And a special task force was busy creating these documents and engaging with supporting organizations of the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative. And we are now preparing an executive summary as well as a special design of the roadmap. And as I said, everything will be released at the COP27 event. The third phase is about to start, and we will be working in work streams. So we have 8 work streams which we created, and I will share details on them a little bit later. And in these work streams, 42 experts and representatives from over 30 organizations are taking part. And as a matter of fact, we just finished kickoff meetings for these work streams. And Christian, thank you very much for all your support on this one. So as promised, here is the overall overview of the 8 work streams we have. We have identified 5 which are dedicated to individual priority areas. And these are venue energy, production and waste, food and food waste, logistics, and travel and accommodation. And I think Ben talked about all of these quite intensively when he was sharing his ideas. And furthermore, we have introduced 3 other work streams which are rather transversal in their nature and feed into the others, if you will. So these are measurement, carbon offsetting, and reporting. So if you like to get more about the project and the content, I very much welcome to visit our website. Here are some links, and we also shared the QR codes. You're also very welcome to contact us anytime. The email is here. So from my side, I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity to introduce the project, to update on the status, and yeah, thanks, and back to you, Danica.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alexander. There's one question that I want to try to get to that's in the chat. So Helen commented on working with clients in high carbon industries, and she's wondering if any of the panelists can comment on if and how their companies are navigating this tricky issue. So maybe one, your experience or advice in this area. So Helen, Ben, and
I'm happy to go first. So yeah, I mentioned some of I was referring specifically to a show that we ran a few weeks ago, which is Batimat. It services the construction industry, and the construction industry is a very big emitter of carbon emissions. And I think the sectors know whether they are, big emitters, and so sustainability becomes a very difficult, a very important issue for them to address. And I think we as event organizers have a role to play in helping and supporting that industry navigate the topic of how do they transition, how do they address it. And we can do this in a number of ways, but one of the ways that we can do it is through the content that we're delivering, through the stages that we have. We're able to kind of share knowledge by profiling and sharing what is working well. But that, there are industries where it's a real challenge. And for us, I think we have to be very mindful of the challenges that some of these industries face. And we are doing a piece of work, actually, a wider piece of work, because RX is part of a bigger group, to actually look at which industries do we have products in and events in, and what is the, assessing, are we helping the transition of that industry so that we understand, our role in, whether we're contributing to the problem or helping to alleviate the problem.
Great. Great. Thank you for answering that question for our audience. I wish I had more time, but we are out of time. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this important topic. And I hope that you found some useful information in this webinar today. And I'll throw it over to Christian just to close us out.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody, and especially the speakers and you, Danica, for the moderation. We have a few slides that Pascal may put up now. So for those who are UFI members, you're welcome still to register to the UFI Congress, which is next month, if you haven't done it yet. And then the next slide is our usual contacts, where to contact us, and you will be receiving the video of this webinar later on today or tomorrow. And then the last slide is to thank you again, and also our diamond sponsors, MICE Thailand, Qatar Tourism, and Freeman. Thank you very much, all of you, and looking forward to see you next face-to-face if possible. Thank you. Bye-bye.